Hello, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and this is a very special episode of the show where we announce and welcome our new intern Haley English from Villanova. And we're going to get into who you are, what you're doing here. But first of all, you're replacing Paul Hodowanik, who's legendary. So the bar is very high. Haley, great to have you. Very excited. Welcome to Purple Insider.
Thank you. Great to be here. I'm very excited to start.
So you published your first article on Purple Insider, and what you're going to be doing is the same thing that Paul did for us on a weekly basis, which is you're going to write an article, and you're much better at math than Paul was. And we're going to get into that, like your data science background, that you're not a journalism dweeb like he and I. You are much smarter than us. And so you're majoring in statistics, but also you interned at Pro Football Focus, which is how we got connected. So you are essentially going to be the Purple Insider Analytics Department.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Before we talk about your Brian Flores article, why was it that you upset Bears fans?
So I wrote an article with Amelia Probst from PFF, and we had basically kind of said that Justin Fields, like, he really can't throw. He's not great at throwing the football. Like, obviously he has all this running talent, and he's like keeping the Bears in games because he can run. You need to be able to throw the ball like accurately if you want to be a successful quarterback in the NFL. And we didn't see that jump from year 1 to year 2. So like if we look at something called perfectly covered plays, like where every coverage defender is doing their job, essentially locking up the receiver, Justin Fields was dead last in EPA on perfectly covered plays. And on plays where there's a receiver still open, he was still dead last. So he's not finding the open receiver. He's not finding the covered receiver, but he's just good at running. So I don't know. If I was the Bears organization, I'd highly consider taking Bryce Young first overall, but I don't think they will. But yeah, just overall, like Bears fans didn't like that. And to this day, I still get random tweets, random DMs being like, yeah, no, like you're dumb. like Justin Fields is good. And I'm like, okay, like we'll see in a couple of years, but I don't really think he can improve much throwing. I mean, they did give him Chase Claypool, but obviously that didn't really work out and for what they kind of paid for him, but we'll see how that goes. I still don't think he's the best passer in the NFL. I don't think he'll ever be that caliber of passer in the NFL just because we didn't see that jump from year 1 to year 2 at all. So who knows?
Yeah, I mean, how much can we factor? Because I think this is, if you're a Bears fan, this is the argument you're making. It's like, well, he didn't have great receivers or a great offensive line. But I don't think the offensive line by the numbers was so horrific that you would say it sort of sounds like Josh Rosen-y, where it was like, oh, well, the situation was bad and everything else. Like that is true. But a lot of times with a bad situation, if you can at least be serviceable, then there's potential there. And I would say that about like Trevor Lawrence in his rookie year. There was no worse situation in the universe than Trevor Lawrence being coached by Urban Meyer with no receivers and a bad offensive line and a bad defense and everything else. But yeah, you could still see it. You could be like, okay, I get it. Like whether it's the tape people breaking it down or even in the numbers, you're like, okay, this was bad, but it was not horrific. So you could still sort of keep hope alive. And then he did take that step this year. With Fields, though, his PFF passing grade, I think, got worse. And his big-time throw rate, which is what everybody rested on for the first year, it like cut in half this year. So he was even taking less risks with his big arm. And I think what you pointed out really demonstrates, I don't know that he sees things very well. Like, I don't know if he's like, they call it processing, but like, I think it's just seeing the coverage, reading it, being able to react really quickly. I think he's a guy that needs somebody right in front of his face to come wide open before he throws the ball. And that's why he gets sacked a ton.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And like, as much as Zach Wilson was god awful and he should never take a snap for the Jets ever again, like he was ahead of Fields in those stats. So like I, as a Jets fan, am willing to let Zach Wilson go, but for some reason, Bears fans aren't willing to let Justin Fields go yet. So I think that's kind of holding them back. And I don't know. I think if you're a Vikings fan or any other fan in the AFC North, you're kind of happy to see Justin Fields stick around.
How much is it worth to be a great running quarterback? Or like how, here's a question. How bad at passing could you be if you're the best running quarterback, basically? I mean, as of last year, like he was one of the best ever. He was in the Mike Vick sort of Vince Young or maybe even better than Vince Young running category. But I do wonder, like, or Lamar Jackson, similar to him, like, how good do you have to be, or how bad can you be if you're the best running quarterback? Yeah, I think that's the way to put it.
Yeah, that's a really like deep question because a lot of injuries can come from running, and you kind of saw that with Lamar Jackson the past 2 years. So like that's why like I don't know if he's going to get all the money that he wants just because he's been injured for the past the end of the past 2 years and kind of took the Ravens out of playoff contention and out of the playoffs because he's not the one playing. So yeah, you definitely need to be able to throw the ball. I think you need to be more skilled at throwing the ball than running the ball. Like you see Patrick Mahomes like has both of them, and he's the best passer in the NFL and one of the best rushers in the NFL. So yeah, it's definitely a very deep question, and I don't know how much you can quantify that.
Yeah, well, maybe that's an off-season article at some point, but yeah, I mean, I think Vince Young is probably below the level. Some of those Titans teams had really good defenses, but like Mike Vick was, for the time, Mike Vick was a serviceable passer and might have even been better had he like studied film and stuff, because he sort of admitted later, like, I really should have been like grinding more tape. So I mean, if Justin, I don't know, like if Justin just has this thing that I think is maybe too hard to overcome, but we'll see with a better situation. And that's the hard thing that the Bears have to deal with, is that he showed so much and now everybody likes him. So if you're the GM that trades him away, but I think your injury point is valid. I mean, he's been injured multiple times, and there was a study maybe like 7 years ago about how running quarterbacks didn't get hurt more than pocket quarterbacks. But I think if we did that study again, that would change a little bit, because the running quarterbacks are running so much more than they were before, that I think that, you know, the bumps and bruises are going to happen a lot. Even with Jalen Hurts, I mean, he was playing in the Super Bowl injured on a run, and Lamar and Justin Fields got hurt several times. So I think that is definitely a factor. And I agree with you. If I had the number one pick, I would just take Bryce Young and trade Justin Fields to somebody else and move on. So let's talk about Brian Flores. You wrote about this, purpleinsider.com. And one of the things that Brian Flores talked about in his introductory press conference was the risk versus reward of blitzing. And I think that's like, it makes a lot of sense intuitively to people that there is. But what you looked into that was really awesome for the site is the exact risk versus reward. So explain how risky blitzing all the time actually is.
It is actually like more risky than you may think, because it does increase the sack rate. It does increase the pressure rate. It increases the pressure rate about 10, 11% and increases the sack rate about 2% when you're blitzing than when you're not. But it does open the door for the big explosive plays to come on. And if we look at in 2022, the league as a whole, they ran blitzes on 25% of defensive snaps and succeeded at holding the offense to negative EPA on 55% of those plays. So it is more than half. So they are holding the offense to negative EPA on over half of all blitzes. But even though the defense was successful on them, it resulted in an average of negative 0.37 EPA per play, or EPA per game. So blitzing, yeah, it may set the offense back, but the explosive plays are much more likely to come from that scenario, and it may not be as advantageous to blitz when you're in a position where you don't have the strength at secondary to trust the one-on-one matchups. So yeah, it might not be the best option to blitz if you don't have that strength.
Yeah, I found that to be very interesting. So it's almost like saying if a defensive coordinator blitzed every time, you would get smoked. Overall, you would be a worse defense than you would be if you didn't blitz at all, which means you really have to pick your spots. And Brian Flores said not being reckless, but I almost think that there's no way to do it without being reckless. And in your article, you kind of compared it to gymnastics. It's like, in a way, you kind of have to be, but you have to be very good at picking your spots. What I noticed, though, from your data that really stuck out to me was that Brian Flores blitzed like a madman in 2019, and his defense in Miami got absolutely demolished. And then the next 2 years, it was much, much better, which I just think may have correlated slightly with them having way better players and not tanking in those seasons. I think what this really comes down to is you can play almost any way you want if you've got great corners and you can cover. But if you can't, then you really it's almost like craps table stuff, right? Like it's almost like just rolling the dice and hoping that you're hitting and that they're not getting an explosive play if you don't have Xavier Howard and Byron Jones and people who can shut down, the opposing wide receivers one-on-one.
Exactly. Like Brian Flores' first year with the Dolphins, he raised their blitz rate 3.5% to about 30%. So that's not the highest he blitzed when he was the head coach of the Dolphins. But yeah, that defensive EPA in 2019 on blitz plays was negative 51.64. That's, I want to say, like second worst or third worst in the league that year. So yeah, that was not the best strategy for him as a first year head coach. But yeah, as he gained like time with the defense and like time with the Dolphins, he raised their blitz rate like almost about 10% more throughout his time there. But they got much more successful on blitzes. So they ultimately got successful on 58.6% of blitzes. So that's 3% above the league average. And they had so much strength in the secondary at cornerback. At safety, he loved blitzing the safeties, Javon Holland and Brandon Jones, and they were both successful. I want to say like 60, and then Javon Holland was successful on 70% of his blitzes. So yeah, if you have the strength at safety and corner, that it's going to make your life a lot easier if you're going to be blitzing.
I think this is really important to Lewis Cines' future because he's really fast and explosive and seems to me like a guy that would be perfect for a heavy blitz situation. And that maybe last year it just talks about like, or I guess connects to how so many players didn't fit with what Ed Donatel wanted to do. Like asking Lewis Cines to be this deep safety who has to read all these route combinations right away as a rookie might have been a little bit tricky for him, as opposed to like, why don't we line you up in the box and like, let's go after quarterbacks. I think Brian Flores is going to work out way better for Lewis Cines there. And, Harrison Smith, obviously, as well. You pointed out in the article that Harrison Smith's been a very successful blitzer, and that's, matches up with the eye test for sure. And yet last year, all the safeties only blitzed. I counted this up 19 times. The whole season, 19 snaps, not 19%, 19 total snaps for the safeties blitzing. So this is going to look way different than it did last year.
Oh, definitely. Like Harrison Smith didn't blitz that often. In fact, I want to say he was below every linebacker on the team in terms of blitzing, but he was successful the second most, only behind Eric Kendricks, who was successful on 62% of blitzes, and Harrison Smith was successful on nearly 60% of them. So I think he's going to be a good option to blitz in the future in this upcoming year. But again, you need to get that help in safety, and you need to get the help on cornerback to be successful at that.
Yeah, I think this is why cornerback has shot up to the top of the list as far as potential for the draft. So I'm really looking forward, Haley, to all the things to come with your data studies. And we're going to do a weekly podcast where we go through what you wrote about. Maybe we will talk about more sitcoms and get more of your hot takes on those. and maybe my Jim Pam take just is like, it's just not for people that I'm just getting to know. Maybe like I shouldn't just pour that on you. It's like maybe too deep. I don't know. But this is a really strong debut for you here. And I'm looking forward to you getting really fully immersed in Viking land as we go forward and have these discussions on a weekly basis. And of course, your articles are going to be absolute must read over at purpleinsider.com. So great to have you on board, intern Haley. And we will talk again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Very excited for it.